We are joined now by Benjamin Anthony. He's a veteran of the Israeli Defense Forces, and he's also the CEO of the Miriam Institute, Forum for Israel-Focused Discussion, Dialogue, and Debate. He's in Tel Aviv. Mr. Anthony, thank you for making time for us.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Anthony, to the best of your knowledge, and based on everything we have seen and heard in this past week, what is the Israeli military's key goal in the days ahead?
Well, the key goal of the Israeli military in the days ahead has been explicated very, very clearly, both by the Prime Minister of the State of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and by the Minister of Defense in the State of Israel, Yoav Gallant. Yoav Gallant said latterly that his goal, as he stood next to his American counterpart, Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense for the United States of America, his goal was to completely topple and destroy Hamas. We've also seen Prime Minister Netanyahu talk about delivering a crushing blow to Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. And I think that such utterances are motivated by the atrocities that we saw. I remind everybody, the State of Israel is bringing itself upright once again in the face of the cruelest, most depraved, most evil raid upon our citizenry that has left 1,300 members of our society dead, killed in the most heinous fashion by Hamas terrorists, emanating from the Gaza Strip into the southern enclaves of the State of Israel along that border. And we have close to 150 of our individuals, Israeli citizens, who are in the Gaza Strip held hostages. And they're not just soldiers. They are men, women, children, even unborn children in some cases. It's quite possible that we have pregnant women there being held hostage inside the Gaza Strip. And of course, we have the elderly and the infirm as well. And as a consequence of that, you are hearing the rhetoric that I just quoted, the complete toppling of Hamas, in the words of the defense minister.
And how does the Israeli military plan to do that?
Well, that's the interesting question. How does the Israeli military plan to bring about the toppling of Hamas? Now, I personally think that there are major questions hanging over that objective. I'll be very happy if I'm proven wrong, but here is my reason for skepticism. First and foremost, to topple Hamas militarily is an objective that might be achievable. To destroy the ideology that powers Hamas, far less so. That's the first point. The second point is that Prime Minister Netanyahu just formed a war cabinet, which includes members of opposition parties, most notably Benny Gantz, a former defense minister and former chief of staff, and Gadi Eisenkot, also himself a former chief of staff. Now, the interesting thing about that unification is that these three have worked together with regard to the Gaza Strip several times in the past, both during Gantz's tenure as Minister of Defense and during his tenure as Chief of Staff of the Israel Defense Forces. And in all cases, the decision that's been made has been to be ultra cautious when it comes to dealing with Hamas inside the Gaza Strip. I'm referring to our most recent major ground incursion there, which took place in 2014, Operation Protective Edge. You saw an incursion, you saw the Israel Defense Forces work to smash Hamas, but ultimately it wasn't conclusive, hence we find ourselves here today. And so I wonder, will this group atop this war cabinet, Benny Gantz, Gadi Eisenkot, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, will they take a different view this time? There's a wrinkle in the theory, which is we have a new presence in the war cabinet, and that is the aforementioned Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant. Yoav Gallant is an unknown entity somewhat, a true fighter in the Israel defense establishment. He might be able to pound his fist with sufficient vigor as to get the Israel Defense Forces to maneuver until they topple Hamas militarily.
Mr. Anthony, many will hear what you have said, many will hear what has been said by Israeli representatives throughout these past 8 days. And there will be fear that while Israel absolutely has the right to defend itself, does it have that right at all costs? Because we've already seen the loss of more than 2,000 Palestinian civilian lives. And so that is a huge concern, not only for those who are in the Palestinian territories, but really for people around the world who are saying, is that really going to make Israel safer if more and more Palestinians, Palestinian children, the elderly, they end up losing their lives because of the actions of Hamas?
So when it comes to the fate of civilians, I have to say that my capacity for concern is tragically fully satiated by the concern I have for the safety of our civilians here in the state of Israel. After seeing our women murdered and raped, after seeing our people decapitated in some cases, after knowing that 150 of them are languishing inside the Gaza Strip, after knowing that their parents and their loved ones sit here in the state of Israel uncertain of their future, I'm afraid that my capacity for concern is absolutely allotted to the citizens of the state of Israel. With that having been said, as a former operator in the Israel Defense Forces, I can tell you very clearly and categorically, though the rules of engagement have changed, there is absolutely no change that includes the deliberate targeting of civilians. Indeed, if any such rule were to be brought into order within the IDF, it would not be adhered to by the soldiers of the Israel Defense Forces. It would be an illegal order, and it would be against our moral code. And in fact, you're seeing that play out. The Israel Defense Forces has repeatedly asked the citizens of northern Gaza to move southward along a humanitarian corridor toward the Rafah crossing. I believe that that speaks to our moral code. I believe it speaks to our principle, and I believe it speaks to our restraint.
Mr. Anthony, I wonder if you'll permit me a more personal question, which is, have you served as a soldier in combat within the military?
I'm a combat veteran of service in the Israel Defense Forces. I'm a veteran of service in the Second Lebanon War of 2006, Operation Pillar of Defense in 2012, and Operation Protective Edge in 2014. And I undertook many tours as a reservist, as a combat reservist within the Israel Defense Forces.
I ask you that, sir, because so many of us have no military experience. War is something that we read about in the newspapers and see in movies. What is it like? What is it like to be on the ground fighting an enemy, but also knowing that there are innocent lives around? And how do you manage this and risk your own life for your country, for your greater cause? Explain that to us on a human level.
For me, as just one individual, as one veteran of service in the Israel Defense Forces, I can tell you it was a great privilege to serve in combat on behalf of my state and of my people. Now, without critiquing the virtues or the demerits of any military campaigns undertaken by any members of the community of democracies around the world, I can tell you that very often soldiers, officers, militaries are sent far away from their homeland in order to project the interests of the country that dispatches them, thousands of miles away from their own borders. That's not the case in the State of Israel. When it comes to the activities of the soldiers of the State of Israel, from our forwardmost operating base, whether it be in southern Lebanon or whether it be in the Gaza Strip, or quite frankly anywhere else, we can literally see as we look behind us from that forward operating base, the homes, the towns, the communities that are torn asunder by the enemies that we face, by the missiles that are launched towards us, and most recently by the horrific terror attacks that were wrought against us at the hands of Hamas. That beast must be defanged, and on a very personal level, despite the challenges of war, I always ask myself, what would be were we not to move forward? Thankfully, I never had to answer that question, because when such a threat befalls us, the Israel Defense Forces knows how to move forward and to find victory. And I'm confident that we will do so in this case.
Benjamin Anthony, I want to thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Thank you for having me.